What's going on, my good people? Mike Hidalgo here. Thank you for joining me on another FCP Euro DIY. Today we're going to be working on a 2015 BMW F82 M4. Today on the M4 behind me, we are going to be working on helping this vehicle run a little bit more efficiently. As you may or may not know, the S55, while a high performance engine, with that comes a lot of heat, and in these tight engine bays, that's probably one of the biggest faults on the F80, F82s, and even F87s. So to help cool things down a little bit, today we're going to be installing this CSF charge intercooler, or top mount intercooler as some people like to refer to it. This has a 60% greater core than the OEM unit coming from BMW directly, so it's going to be quite the upgrade. It's also visually appealing to look at. There's no plastic on it. And you can get this in a couple different finishes, all available on fcpro.com. There's going to be a couple things that we're going to pull off of the old cooler that we're going to transfer over to this, so be sure to hang on to it for just a moment. And we also have some new hardware, which is included from CSF, along with a nice Torx wrench. Since this is an all metal version of what we're going to be removing, there's a lot of plastic on that has a lot of self-tapping screws. These have fine thread screws, which we are going to be using instead. But before we get on to that, a couple other things to note is you're going to want to have some coolant and distilled water, as we're going to be draining the low temp circuit on the M4. That's what this system runs on. There's two split systems, low temp, high temp. Today's going to be the low temp, so make sure you have that handy as well. And before we get started, let's take a look at some of the tools we're going to need for this DIY. For this DIY, we'll be using our Airlift U-View to vacuum fill the cooling system. We have a 1/4-inch ratchet, a small set of pliers. We have a small pick, Phillips head, and a flathead. We also have our CTA flex nut driver set. These have 5 mil to 8 mil, so we'll probably be using the 6 on the BMW hose clamps. We have a small extension for the 1/4-inch ratchet, an 8 mil socket, a T25, and a T30. There's also a Torx Allen wrench style tool supplied with the CSF unit, just something to keep in mind for those of you trying to scramble for tools last minute. Of course, a catch can for coolant is going to be necessary. Now we know what we're working with, let's go ahead and get started. All right, my good people, we are under the hood of the F82. The first thing we're going to do is work on draining the low temp cooling system, or cooling circuit, I should say. So we're going to open up the expansion tank cap, which is the one located up here by the cowl. Obviously, whenever you're doing any kind of work like this on any vehicle with any cooling system, make sure it's nice and cold. This one has been sitting in the shop for a couple days on the lift, so it's going to be more than fine to work on. Okay, now that we have that open, we're going to get underneath the vehicle, and I'm going to show you where to drain from. All right, we are underneath the M4. We're going to be working on the passenger side of things. One of our radiators for the low temp circuit is in front of the right wheel. So we're going to remove a couple 8mm screws to get this bottom butt cheek or splash shield portion off. We're missing a couple here, and this one's a bit damaged, so we'll have to replace it. But we have 3 on the inside of the fender liner, 3 on the bottom. Let's see what we got to work with here after the lip install. We have a little less room to work with. All right, and typically we have one more 8 mil, which on our car is living underneath this front lip bracket. It's an aftermarket unit, so typically you're not going to have that. There really should be nothing in your way of getting that out. I think, however, seeing the condition of the splash shield, we have more than enough room to work here and get to the lower hose on our radiator. And I'm actually going to use this as a funnel to direct the coolant into my catch can. So let me grab the catch can now, and then we'll show you where to drain from. All right, now we're going to work, I'm just using a small pick. You can use a small flathead screwdriver. Pull this clip right there. That's going to unlock our coolant hose. We have our catch can underneath, and I'm just going to go in here, pull the hose, try not to take a bath, and see how much of it we can catch. All right, now that we're done draining, we're going to plug this baby back up, get that clip situated. We're going to be good to go. We're going to clean this up, get our hardware back on. We're going to get our 8 mil hardware back in. All right, now that our car is buttoned back up, we can head back up top, work on removing the intercooler, and swapping out the parts for the new one. All right, up top, we're gonna start with undoing the clamp that comes off of our J-pipe. I'm gonna be using the 7mm flex head driver. You can use a regular flathead screwdriver to get at this, but these come in really handy from CTA to get in these little harder reach spots. You can also use a regular socket on a small 1/4" ratchet. Sometimes these clamps can be pretty stuck on there just from time and heat, so you want to break the seal. Use a nice big thick pick or flathead screwdriver. You don't want something thin that's going to possibly pierce the boot. Now we have the upgraded one on here from DO88, so the clamp and boot may look a little bit different than yours, but the same idea remains. Then we're going to work off our connector to our sensor. So for that, I like to use a tiny pick and just lift up the tab and then push down with my finger. There we go. And we can hang this guy over here. All right. Now let's move on to our coolant lines. Let's get those out of the way. So to give ourselves a little bit of working room, I'm going to undo this little clamp here. These are, I call them zebra clamps. I don't actually know what they're called, but they remind me of zigzags. I don't know. I'm just here to show you what's good, my good people. We're gonna open up this baby. It's gonna give us some wiggle room. And we're gonna pop this line off of our cooler. Doesn't hurt to throw a towel under there just to catch any coolant, should there be any in the lines, which is always very possible. And then these are all gonna be just like the rest of the coolant lines, quick disconnect style. Lift that up, pull back. And now with this, we have all the room in the world to get this line out of our way, shove a towel in it, keep it from leaking on us, all that good stuff. So let me do that first, and then we'll move on to the next ones. All right, now we have that line off. Something we can do is take one of the rubber caps from our new CSF unit and just put it over this so that when we start lifting this unit out, we don't spill any of the coolant that's in it out. So I'm gonna grab one of those now and we'll plop that on. All right, next we're gonna work on the next line. I'm gonna get, again, some towels situated under here just to catch any potential coolant. Another quick disconnect clip up top. We're also gonna do this one here on the side. Even though this one doesn't go directly to the cooler, it does go to a line under the cooler. So having it freed is just gonna give us a lot more room to work with and tuck that baby back. So we're gonna make sure to cap this off. We can see the coolant in there. That's gonna go all over our engine bay if we don't use these caps. So while I have you down here, we have a couple things that are attached to the bracket that's gonna come up with our intercooler, or charge cooler, sorry. We have this hard line. It literally just pops out of this plastic clip. Then we have one of our sensors that goes to our intake. You can just lift that up. That can lift up. And then when we go to lift this unit up, there is a rubber grommet here. That's what we're gonna be lifting up on to get this whole unit free, which we'll get to in just a moment. I just wanna show you where it is. We'll be reaching down underneath like so and pulling up. For now, let's move over to the charge pipes. 7mm driver, again, the CTA one, but a Phillips head or flathead will work. These are the stock charge pipes. We are going to be upgrading these to the beautiful eVenturi. And you've already seen us do a DIY in the intake, but for the build portion of this car, which you can follow over at FCP Euro Media on YouTube, we're going to be installing the intake along with a couple other cool bits. So be sure to stay tuned for that. This car is almost 10 years old. Sometimes hardware changes, and funny enough, these are the standard 6mm or 6mm clamps, which we're going to switch to a flathead. So just this one was replaced, which is why I couldn't use my driver on it. But you want them to be nice and loose. And we're going to just gently pull back on them just to pop them off. All right. We're gonna keep the reservoir attached to the intercooler. We're gonna put the cap back on so we don't spill any coolant out of that. And now we're gonna lift up from the bracket, which I was showing you just a moment ago, and then we'll work it off of the J-pipe and get this unit out and over to the workbench. All right, let's get this baby over to the workbench and we'll show you how to transfer over all the other bits. All right, we're gonna work on transferring over the sensor, some brackets, and our expansion tank over to our new cooler. We'll start with our sensor first. We'll pop off this red rubber grommet. And then we have on the old unit 2 T30s that we're gonna remove. We will not be reusing that hardware. Again, these are only for the plastic end tanks. Our CSF unit comes with some fresh hardware that we'll be using for that. Some nice fine thread screws. Then we'll take a look at the O-ring on here. This one's still in really good shape. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm gonna put a little bit of silicone grease on it. I like to use dielectric grease whenever I'm doing any sort of O-ring. And it's just gonna make sure that it goes in nice and easy, especially since we're going into this fresh new housing. Very tiny amount, almost just the thought of it. Just a little dab. And we'll make sure to feed it facing down. Get a little twist. Boom, baby. Now we'll grab 2 of the short T30s and get these started by hand. Let's turn it around first. We have a clamp here for the reservoir hose. Small set of pliers will do. Just gonna pull that back. We're gonna break the seal on the hose. Obviously, you don't want to grip it to the point where you're gonna damage the hose. Just enough that you can spin it, twist it, and break that seal. Beautiful. Up top here, we have 2 T25s that hold the top part of the expansion tank to the old intercooler in place. And we have our hose at the bottom. We're gonna flip this whole thing around, take a little bath and cool it, not too much. We did drain most of it out, but there's always gonna be a little bit trapped in here. And we're gonna switch back to our T30. We have this bracket assembly, which has a couple grommets on it, which hold the intercooler in place, as well as the one bracket up front, which held our harness going to our intake, as well as one of our breather lines. And we'll take our new T30. We have 5 of these. We'll go ahead and get these started by hand first. These are going to be used for securing the expansion tank to the intercooler. On the old setup, the plastic tanks had threaded holes. On these ones, they're going to go through. So we're going to feed these babies through, get them through the body here. And we have 2 little nuts for the backside to thread on and snug up. So we're going to use our 8mm socket from earlier along with the Phillips head on the other side, and we'll just snug these up nice and gently. At this point, we have our brackets transferred over, our expansion tank is transferred over. We just need to hook up the hose to the actual cooler. Take this little protective red cap off. Feed the hose on, and then get the clamp situated. All right, we are ready to go back in the car, so let's take these caps off and we'll feed it in. Now we're gonna feed this in, and I like to get the metal bracket kind of lined up with its rubber grommet up front. Push these charge pipes out of the way. And then we also need to be mindful of the J-pipe. So right now I'm just trying to get the tip of that into the hose of the J-pipe. The charge pipes are pretty much situated. Over here, we're making sure the J-pipe boot is on. And then with that, we're just gonna get a feel for the grommets and push down. Super easy. All right, before we go any further, these lines pretty much self-tuck themselves back into place, which is always cool. So as long as that and your harness is good, the little harness I'm gonna clip in, then we can do our coolant lines, tighten down some clamps, all that good stuff. Let's swing this coolant line over. I'm gonna lift up on it a little bit. It's kind of a tight fit with this Evolve oil filter housing cap. The plastic one has a little bit more of a curve to it, which is gonna give us that normal room that this was probably designed to work with. I've lifted the cooler a bit up off of the grommet up front, and we're gonna get this hose on. We have the clip already down so that we can hear it click on. This can be a little bit of a tight fit again, but once you have it on, make sure you can give it a nice little pull. As long as it feels nice and secure, you're gonna be good to go. You can get the auxiliary line hooked back up, coming off of the auxiliary tank, or expansion tank. Now we can swing over our other coolant line. Coolant lines up front are nice and situated. We have the clamps on the charge pipes and the J pipe to do next. So let's snug those up, and then we can work on filling this baby up with some coolant. Now we're gonna get our 6mm driver. This is the correct size for these clamps, and actually found the missing clamp underneath the old charge intercooler. So someone was probably in here last and misplaced it, thought they lost it, and just put in a different replacement. So that was nice. All right, let's move over to the J-pipe side of things. Just fishing for our plug to our sensor. There we go. And now we're gonna line up our clamp here. This one still uses a 7mm driver. This one's from DO88. So this is the boot and the clamp that came with that J-pipe. We also have a DIY on that as well. Now we have that situated. This baby is nice and mounted in. All that we have left to do is to fill it up with coolant. So we're gonna take our 50-50 mix of the blue stuff, the good stuff, and some distilled water. We'll get our vacuum fill tool, hook that up, and then we'll fill her up. All right, gang, we have our vacuum fill tool hooked up to air. We have it sitting inside of the expansion tank. I'm gonna close the valve. And if you haven't seen us use this before, basically the goal of this tool is to pull all the vacuum inside of the cooling system. And then this feed hose is gonna suck in the coolant that we have here on the bucket. And it's gonna replace all that lack of vacuum, if you will, or lack of air directly with coolant, keeping us from having any air bubbles in the system. Obviously, it never hurts to check the level after you ran the car and let it cool down again, but this is usually gonna get you there most of the way. We're gonna pull vacuum until we hit about 25 on our gauge, and then we'll let it sit for a minute just to make sure we have no leaks, make sure everything is nice and good here. And then once we're happy with that, we'll open the valve, making sure the hose is always submerged in the coolant. If you let any air in, it defeats the purpose of this whole thing. We're at that number. We'll let it sit for a minute. And then once we're ready, we'll open up the valve. We'll keep this submerged and we'll let it fill. Now with one hand, I'll be back here making sure that this is sitting in our coolant bucket. And over here, I'll open it up. All right, at that point, it's done. It's pretty quick. It's not a large system. I'm gonna close this valve, release the air. Then the last thing you wanna do is just make sure you have the level correct inside of the reservoir. There's a little yellow, almost like a little sub ledge inside of the expansion tank. Once that top of the yellow ledge is just submerged, just under the coolant, that's gonna be when you're full. So make sure you top that off if it needs any more, or pull some out, turkey baster or small syringe when you're done. And once you're happy with that, my good people, all that's left to do is throw in our cap, like so, and take this baby for a test drive. Again, 60% larger core than the OEM unit. This should definitely help things stay a little bit cooler under here. Of course, if you have the beauty cover, throw that back on. We're gonna get into charge pipes next on the next DIY. So if you wanna see that, be sure to subscribe to the channel. If you wanna follow along on the build, be sure to head over to FCP Euro Media for that. And if you like this DIY, give it a thumbs up. Any questions or comments, leave those in the comment section below. I'm always checking them out. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.